BXB. It's in the game!
Amazingly, it's been 5 years since Square Enix rebooted the Deus Ex franchise with Deus Ex Human Revolution. So now, finally, after those intervening 5 years, which involved time there where they redid that original Human Revolution game, where they tidied up the much maligned boss fights, where they improved some of the mechanics, we have a new entry into the Deus Ex universe, as Square Enix would like to call it, and that is Deus Ex Mankind. Deus Ex Mankind Divided continues the story of Adam Jensen 2 years after the conclusion of Human Revolution. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm struggling to remember exactly what happened at the end of that game, which is fine because there's an extensive recap video bundled in with this game which you can watch and which will catch you up entirely on the plot of the previous game. So even if you didn't play the previous game, you're still going to be able to jump in here and have some fun. Basically, at the end of Human Revolution, a thing happens called the augmented, it's going to be important that I get that word right, because it comes up a lot in this game, strangely enough, but the augmented incident, which revolved around this signal being sent out that sent all the augmented people completely crazy and went into a homicidal sort of killing spree, murdering loads of people. Now, that in a world which is already deeply distrustful of augmented people, and unsure of where this fits into human evolution and religion and culture and society, well, guess what? It brought out the worst in people. It basically meant that augments were stuck in ghettos, and then they were put into internment camps, and they were treated really nastily. And that's where the game starts off. Basically, you start off in this city called City of Prague, not called Prague. You know Prague; it's a real place. So you start in the city of Prague, which was, according to the law of the universe, this sort of bastion for augmented people. They were actively trying to bring augmented individuals into the city, and bring them closer together with humans. Of course, when the incident happens, that means this is now this flashpoint and this focus point for augmented people's rights, and how they're dealing with it will reflect how the world is going to deal with these people. And yeah, that's what this game is kind of all built on. It's built on this mistrust, this conspiracy. There is a wider issues afoot. It's quite a complex political and socio-economic climate that the game brings you into. And it's a very serious one. It's a very serious tone. Adam Jensen was already a very serious guy, if you remember him from the previous game, growling at everything possible. He's kind of like Batman if Batman was never Bruce Wayne. He's always turned up to 11 with the gruffness, even with his pointy chin and perfectly manicured goatee. He's a sad individual. I mean, the crux of his motivations at the beginning in the first game was that he was forced to be augmented. It wasn't a choice, and therefore he then comes to terms with that over the course of the game. And now, of course, everybody hates augments. Everybody's even more distrustful of augmented people. So it's this real problem he has with fitting into society and fitting in with who he is. And of course, that lets the player make a lot of choices and gives you a lot of freedom as to how you deal with situations, because Adam himself, he isn't so sure. So it makes sense for the player to make a lot of these choices. And that's very similar to the first game. And weirdly, the slightly different political sort of climate and setting aside, this game is incredibly similar to the first game. When I played this game, I was very much looking forward to this. I really enjoyed the first game since the reboot, Human Revolution. But I found that Mankind Divided hasn't added a lot to that experience. There isn't a lot of revolutionary new mechanics or interesting new sort of things you can do. For example, a lot of the augmentations you can have in this game, they're the same as the ones you had in the previous game. There's this new set of augmentations that you can get, which is explained through this sort of like they're sort of secret ones, hidden ones in Adam's own body, and that's like a plot point that you discover them and stuff, and that's great, and that's a cool idea that explains a way you can get new powers and stuff. But even they don't have a lot of effect really on who you are as a player and how you play the game. I mean, I play the game all the way through basically in the same way I played Human Revolution, which was you go into an encounter, you try and be stealthy, and when that fails, you get the big guns out and you shoot everybody with a very effective shotgun. It's actually one of the best shotguns in video games today. It's a very cool gun. So you've got those same tenets in this game that you had in Human Revolution, if you remember. So you have the stealth, you have the augments, you have the the ability to pick up various weapons, you have the ability to customize your weapons. You obviously can customize Adam through the augment choices, and therefore all these things can complement a playstyle that best suits you. And that's great, but the same problems that the previous game had are present here. It's not the best stealth game, it's not the best action game, and it's not the best role-playing game. It's trying to do all of these things, and what it means is it doesn't get any of them quite right. It can be, stealth can be a bit hit and miss. Action can certainly feel janky. The shooting doesn't feel great half the time. The guns often sound strange. And you'll notice the game looks really nice for the most part. Environmentally, it's gorgeous. But then you talk to someone, or you get into a dialogue moment with a side character, and you realise the character models are terrible for the most part in this game. The voice acting, while isn't necessarily bad, it doesn't match up with the lips at all, and it just looks like puppets talking. It's really unnerving, considering how beautiful the game is on a grander scale. It's definitely disappointing in that regard. You have the same, like in the previous game, the sort of fitting items into the box inventory management style, which is some people enjoy, some people don't. I mean, one of the things I enjoy about this game is that I'm going around, breaking into every building I can, getting into every apartment, reading every email, finding every pocket secretary. I really love the hacking in this game and the exploration that gives, and I can spend hours just reading through stuff, and that's in there. Perhaps a bit less readable material than the previous game, but I think the quality of what's there is better, and it certainly helps flesh out this universe. This incredibly, I can't stress this enough, this incredibly serious, dour universe. There are a couple of moments of humour, there are a couple of characters that will make you smile, but for the most part, whereas the previous game there was some hope to how things were going to turn out, there was some hope to the augmented sort of problems that were happening in the world. This is after this tragedy has happened, and millions of people have died, and that you find yourself. I find yourself in this game. One thing that was interesting was being pulled politically and socially in one or another direction. For example, I started this game wanting to not hurt the police. They're just doing a job. They're just, they're out there doing what they're doing because that's what they've got to do. It's a horrible situation. But I found myself more and more, as they were so hostile towards me, they were so rude to me, they were racist to me, I found myself being less and less likely to try and keep the police alive, and I was actually more of a proponent for augmented human rights, and I ended up sort of leaning towards their extreme beliefs a little bit, because I'm an augmented person and I'm just seeing so much prejudice aimed towards me, and I think that's quite clever. Whether that's an intended aspect of the game or not, I don't know, but it certainly made it an interesting experience at times. I thought I was gonna have a clearer idea of how I felt about this game, but I've actually been really struggling with my thoughts on this game, because it does so little to innovate or evolve the formula of the previous game. It's just more of the same, and that's great if you enjoyed that, and I did. But when you're looking for a sequel to a game that's 5 years later down the line, that's not even the normal sort of 3-year cycle. That's quite a way. That's quite a long time since that previous game. You're just hoping for it to ask narratively a few more questions. You're hoping to see a few more mechanics and sort of an evolution of the gameplay, but there just doesn't seem to be present. One thing they've done is, people didn't like those boss fights in the previous game. They're not there anymore, but it means that there's not much of a crescendo. I'm not going to talk about the ending of this game. You might have already heard that it's pretty unsuccessful, doesn't really work as a conclusion, and it's not wrong. This definitely feels like the middle part in a trilogy, with a trilogy I didn't know anybody had asked for, but there you go. So it's difficult to to recommend this game wholeheartedly. I think the mechanics that are here are fun enough, but I'm just not seeing a great deal of innovation, so I can't score this higher than a solid 3 out of 5.
BXB. It's in the game.